Founder of Blackbox AI, and I'd like to take a minute just to go a little bit through my background because I have a pretty unique perspective of looking at companies from the very early stage of innovation all the way up through venture capital raising into larger enterprises. So I started my career in 2010 as founding a computer vision and machine learning company called Immersive Labs, and we focused on emotion expression recognition and emotion sentiment analysis, which is basically using a web camera to detect your face, your emotions, your age, and we used that to affect advertising, working with some of the biggest brands in the world, and Walmart, Target, Reebok, and some others. And so we learned quite a bit of things working through that, and was able to sell that company in 2015, and later worked at a $20 million early stage venture fund, mentoring about a dozen companies through the go-to-market product and innovation process. Having gone through that, I also worked as a management consultant. So I've worked with companies from Series A to Series B, all the way through innovation spin-offs of large companies. So I have a pretty unique insight through going through this, and have really developed a passion around Organization 2.0 is what I'm calling it. The origins of this is really what you see today is these new emerging technologies that are essentially capabilities, whether it's artificial intelligence, blockchain, any of these other tools that are out there. And by and large, our tendency is to take these new capabilities and apply them to old governance structures, meaning the way business should be done, the way our mental models of work has been really conditioned over many, many years, because that's just the way it works. Alvin Toffler was the author of a book called Future Shock, and if you haven't read it, I really recommend you do read it. And he says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that is one of the challenges we face today as we are in the transitionary process between Organization 1.0, where we have standard operating procedures, things that have worked for many, many years, as we transition into this new Organization 2.0. So being able to unlearn is going to be one of the more important facts and more important things that we have to develop within ourselves over the coming years. Now, the future of work is a term that has been used to describe this emerging field for quite some time. I don't think there is a business course, a business luminary, a news article, a conference where you don't actually hear the term the future of work, or this need for a new collaborative mindset. But it certainly presents some many challenges. I think we've been hearing the rise of AI and automation as it affects the concern of workers that are going to be losing their jobs, the scarcity of top talent, being able to procure the talent we need in order to solve some of these big challenges, and the changing demographics as more boomers are retiring and millennials and Gen Z coming up after them are going to be wanting more meaning in their lives. So AI certainly brings benefits, but society and enterprise will need to prepare in order to take advantage of the capabilities that AI, machine learning, deep learning, they will apply to this new coming world. First of all, it's really the changing relationship between the employer and the employees. I think for many years, actually going back to when my dad was working, he said he would work to feed his belly. And today, we're now looking for more impact in the world. We want to have, to a sense, self-actualization. We want to have a sense of purpose. I think that's really true for many young workers. It's more than just showing up and putting in your time. It is really honing your craft and being able to have pride in a sense of your work. And as the world has become more distributed, we have people that are coordinating among a diverse range of locations. So work is no longer just centralized in one location. And so that presents some challenges between the relationship of the employer and the employee. We're going to see an increased adoption of augmenting humans and machines. That means we'll have less drudgery, less repetitive tasks. But that also means that the level of sophistication required to accomplish tasks will be much higher. So the upskilling of workers will be very important. Then there's virtual enterprises. This means we can build a consortium of organizations that work together to solve challenges that would normally be very challenging for just one organization in and of themselves. But the problem we face today with Organization 1.0 is that information is fragmented, it's siloed, we have data that is siloed, and it is becoming more challenging in a world that is more interconnected. And so what is needed is a form of a connective tissue that allows these various organizations to operate with much less friction. So there are some readiness challenges, I think, for many organizations. Number one, there's huge investment outside of core competency. If you're in a consumer packaged goods space, if you're in a healthcare space, if you name the sector, you spend a lot of time really honing your expertise into one particular core competency. But now artificial intelligence and all these tools mean that you now have to think really outside the box, to use a cliche term. You have to really expand yourself beyond just your core focus. So there's really challenges in finding skill sets for that, and the lack of talent to organize and collect the huge amounts of data that's being generated, not just from people, but also from sensors and the machine-to-machine interactions that will occur. Another challenge is the lack of understanding around AI's ROI impact. It is really challenging to connect a business case when all you do all day are really looking at the numbers to then somehow be able to seamlessly translate that into technical capabilities, and vice versa. If you've been focusing all day on deep learning, machine learning algorithms, being able to translate that into a business case is equally challenging. And what are the economic implications of those things? So it makes it challenging for companies to be competitive with AI. Next is, it's technology looking for a problem. And this is often the case when you have teams of PhDs that are building technology, and the real issue between those two areas of capability and business case is knowing where to apply it. And so being able to define an AI strategy that will unlock ROI investment. And also address some of the legacy issues, because it isn't just turning on a switch. And I think one of the challenges for many companies is looking at artificial intelligence as a one-and-done solution. Many companies want to grab AI as a box and put it on an assembly line. And that's how they view AI, as a one-and-done solution. And really, it's a seed and grow. It is a huge investment. It is a long-term plan that you have to build toward the vision of your organization as a long-term strategy. It's also really challenging for companies to know where to start. And I think this is really, ties back to these other 3 points. It's a funding issue. You have limited resources, you have limited time, and what you're really trying to do is piece all of these different things together to have the biggest impact you can, because you need to have those short-term wins. Without those short-term wins, you can't get the credibility you need, and you can't get the internal support to then have future investments for the projects. So William Gibson says that the future is already here, it is just not very evenly distributed. And we've all seen this amazing videos on YouTube and on our social network feeds. It has robots doing backflips, and robots that are picking up pallets, and supply chain automation, and all of these really interesting things that are occurring. And we're really at the beginning stages of it. In fact, Jeff Bezos says we're the first batter up at bat. It is the golden age of AI. So it's a very exciting time. But the future of work will be anything but traditional. This is the current Org 1.0 structure. If you are to build a company today, there is a very, very good chance it will look just like this. You have a CEO at the top, you have top management, middle management, even lower management, non-management, and lowest non-management. Decisions are made from the top, and data is generated at the bottom. And there's capital extraction where a board of directors makes decisions on where those resources are distributed. So there are some challenges in this type of structure because of something called a Dunbar number, which is really 150 people. It's the maximum number of relationships that a human can engage in. And so that's why we have this type of structure. The CEO can only manage so many people, and that has to go to the next level of management, and so forth and so on. But when so doing, you create levels of bureaucracy and levels of friction, which make it challenging to scale, especially in a new emerging economy. Org 2.0 looks much more like this. It is a combination of developers, investors, users, and an interoperability between multiple entities that creates a virtuous cycle. So it's really talking about incentivizing behaviors. So rather than looking at things from an extrinsic perspective of paying more money or having better ping pong tables in the office, it's about how do we really incentivize people who want to get up early and stay up late because that's what they want to do anyway. So Org 2.0 as an AI framework is really needed to solve some of the complex governance issues that will happen as we transition from being in a location where in the old days of the industrial era, scarcity added value. If you own the buildings, if you own the means of production, then you win. In the new economy, sharing adds value. We have open APIs, we have open patents now with companies like Tesla and others. And so there is really what we're seeing a big disparity from companies that are operating in Silicon Valley and the majority of the rest of the world is still operating in this old economy. So that means we're going to need a level of transparency, the self-operating governance to really bridge across some of the silos. We have silos that exist within departments. You have a marketing team's journey that doesn't connect into a sales journey, that doesn't connect into a customer support journey, even within the same entity. So here's some of the challenges with Organization 1.0 silos. High bench cost. Let's say you have a data scientist. This data scientist is probably at a certain capacity, certain utilization of his time. If he's not shared among other organizations, he or she is probably forced to work on lesser tasks that are probably not as engaging for that individual. It means they're not as satisfied in their work. You have duplicated overhead costs between organizations A, B, C, and D. You have reconciliation of accounts. There's just inefficient governance and friction that exists. Now, Org 2.0 is more collaborative, and it's what many people in the industry, from Singularity University to events all over the world are talking about, is really a need for sharing resources and opening our minds to a new way of operating. So in the same way you have Uber for shared transportation, which a decade ago would seem unimaginable that you go into a stranger's vehicle or like Grab, or Airbnb or these other services where you can share someone's apartment. In the future, we might have sharing of employees, or the employee-employer relationship might transform where you have ad hoc teams. Similar to a way that a Hollywood movie is created. Teams join together, they work on a project. When they accomplish the objective or the deliverable of that project, they can disband and then join something else. That means we need to have an intelligent trust ecosystem to manage the reputation of all of the participants that are involved. So it looks something more like this. If you're that data scientist, you no longer have to have a low utilization of your skill set. You no longer have to have tasks where you're not fully expanding yourself and honing your craft. You can now share that bench cost as an employer among multiple groups, and everyone gets to take the benefit of that specialized on-demand talent. So the future of work will require collaboration across entities. Today, the world of work has changed dramatically from the days of the past. Lifetime employment is no longer really a thing as much as it once was. People coordinate from Hong Kong to Singapore to New York to San Francisco and all over the world. Projects are distributed, and that makes it very challenging for companies to work. And as we become a culture that is this diverse and culture of trade and commerce, we really need to have a connective tissue or a framework to at least aspire to from where we are today to where we will eventually go that is adaptable and agile enough to accommodate the needs of the future. So what are some of the benefits of this? As I mentioned, interoperability across entities. So that is almost unimaginable now. I think it does happen with certain organizations where you have some ability to share information, but it is largely based on a relationship. It's largely based on the meta level of trust that exists between humans. Load balancing of human resources. So in the same way you would load balance a server because you have too much load here, you would be able to take that data scientist and you'd be able to apply him to other areas where his skill set may be better suited. Business process workflow modules. So today in HR, you have to have an onboarding process, an offboarding process. You have all of these internal systems, and every single organization has to duplicate those processes. What if there was a way to have a WordPress for business processes where it's transferable? I really like organizations A's business process for onboarding. Let's take that process and apply it to our organization. So you're essentially creating a business in a box solution. Now the closest we have today for something like this is really G Suite. It's tools that will allow us to have teams that can operate interdependently. But there's a lot of work that could be done to improve upon those systems. Now what this means, because we have access to shared talent, we can share the risk and we can share the talent of a global workforce for on-demand specialization. Now Harvard Business Review breaks this down into these axes of democratization of work and the technological empowerment. So there are four main quadrants, and it's been adapted a bit here, but you can see the current state we have today, Org 1.0, we have full-time employment, variations of contract, part-time work, and it's pretty traditional delivery. And there's all kinds of organizations that serve that today. Some of the more innovative companies in the world, from Apple and Amazon and Google, have really worked to create this turbocharged version of where we are today, and they have amazing tools using cloud, AI, personalization, and devices to make that possible. But still, it is a very much full-time employment with some variation for flexible work. With greater democratization of work, we're seeing work reimagined. Companies like WeWork are providing diverse environments for us to be able to participate in work. Upwork has allowed a platform for gig workers to work from anywhere in the world, and you have that flexibility. And then there are smaller tasks such as Fiverr and others. But with high democratization and high technological empowerment, we get into the Org 2.0 future state. So this future state is much like I described earlier. It's these ad hoc teams forming together like a Hollywood movie. Extreme automation. And here's where AI comes into play. Imagine a group of individuals or entities that are part of a trust network. All of these individuals are contributing data into this network. So they're training a reinforcement learning engine. Now what we're able to do then is use that information to create a reward gradient. And that will help us really understand how can we incentivize these individuals for the right type of behavior. So this is how we would be able to manage a trust-related network. So this is using new technologies, AI, blockchain, tokens, communities, and devices on the edge that would make something like this possible. So as I mentioned, the relationship between employers and employees will continue to change. The rules are changing. The economic rules are changing because the economic rungs are being cut from the bottom. As our capabilities are increasing, as the work drudgery goes away, the sophistication level will rise, meaning you'll have to have a higher skill set from the days past. On top of that, we're seeing an exponential growth of AI computing and cloud computing technologies that are really making it interesting for people at the lower economic rungs of the ladder. You can see the world of work changing there's a map of the last 150 years or so. You can see a huge amount of work going toward agriculture. Agriculture, we've now shrunk to a fraction. We're feeding billions more people. Technology has been amazing. We've been able to diversify our workforce among all these different verticals. And we've done some amazing things, but really what the interesting point is that we've gone from this era of mechanical muscles, and now we're going to this era of mechanical minds. So that's often the question of why is this time any different? We've survived these storms before. We've gone from an era of farm workers that have transitioned into retail, and retail transitioning to professional services. But now we're doing this all intergenerationally. This is all happening at the same time. And it's, if you look at this map here of the AI 100, these are a variety of the various sectors that are some of the leaders in the space. And these are all startups targeting upper and middle class jobs. I've worked with companies and helped advise companies that are looking at this space, and they're thinking, how can we replace patent attorneys? How can we replace insurance claims adjustment? How can we really automate some of the business processes and the other professions that are out there? And it creates huge amounts of efficiency, but it also really does change the nature of work. Org 1.0 workers today, 70% of them are disengaged on a day-to-day basis, according to Gallup. So these are individuals that show up and by and large work for a soul-crushing organization. They don't necessarily feel the sense that they want to be a part of this. They just basically show up so they work hard enough not to get fired and get paid enough so they don't quit. And that's unfortunate, because I think that's a huge portion of where the underlying value is hidden in organizations, is how do we unlock the human capabilities that exist. 89% of employers think people leave for more money. Only 12% actually do. Many leave because of a toxic work environment. 72%, at least in these stats in the United States, they want to quit and be entirely independent. I think there's a large degree of need for many people to be in charge of their own destiny. But they don't want to do that entirely unstructured, and they don't want to do that entirely as a silo, because community really matters, I think, for a lot of people. So for Organization 2.0 workers of tomorrow, top talent wants freedom. They want flexibility. They want to have shared resources because they don't want to have to do it all. It's impossible for anybody to do it all. The benefits of a big company is you have marketing, you have legal, you have all of these other benefits. As an independent worker, you got to do it all yourself. And you're largely living a feast and famine income cycle if you have to do that. So there is also a huge desire to take advantage of the automation of these tedious tasks. I think there is really a lot of benefit to be had from AI. I had the opportunity over the last couple of years to interview companies, interview employees from companies such as Google, Apple, Intel, Microsoft, from all over the world. And they told me some really interesting things. They said, I have aging parents, I have toddlers, and I want to go sit on a beach in Thailand. So those are some of the things that really a lot of people are expressing. Is they are the Google Maps pizza category owner, and they do one thing all day, and they went to Stanford, and they're brilliant, but they're really stuck with one narrow field of view and perspective. And I think many people are looking to expand themselves beyond that. This is the cyclical economy, as I mentioned, so where sharing adds value. So rather than looking at just extrinsic incentives for employees, such as more money or such as better ping pong tables, being able to really affect people that motivates them in a really, truly meaningful way. There is a lack of meaning and a lack of purpose in so many individuals on a day-to-day basis. And we're sitting here scratching our heads as management leaders wondering, how can I engage my employees? How can I get them to want to get up in the morning and really be part of this team? And so we do these games and we try to do all these different structures. But really at the end of the day, we really ignore the fundamental humanness that we have within us. And if we don't embrace that, we'll find that AI will completely make us irrelevant. The benefit of a system like this is that it uses this intrinsic motivation, the stewards that genuinely care about what they're participating in and the research that they're conducting, to drive additional shareholder value for profit return. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. You don't necessarily have to have an organization that is purpose and has people at the center and that excludes somehow its ability to make a return for investors. In fact, I think that the new system, Org 2.0, won't be about making the old system, replacing the old system. It has to make the old system obsolete. It has to show an economic return. So by putting people at the center, this theory at this point, because that's what it is really that we can have greater economic returns because we have less friction and because we can operate. Now the issue is, how do we solve the scalability of trust? So why look to AI for governance? As we continue to generate new data, as we continue to have sensors embedded into vehicles, you'll see what's largely in parallel to what's happened in the financial sector with derivatives trading, automatic robo trading, and machines that are making decisions at a pace so quick that it's challenging for humans to be able to intervene. And I think that's why we have some of these safeguards. But exponential risk from AI is because of the speed of these AI engines making decisions. There are ethical implications of this as well, as we start incorporating things in face recognition and some of the things like privacy, data handling, safety in the interactions between humans and machines and what that looks like. The AI feedback loop, so from input that we receive from all of the variety of sensors and the way we feed these systems to the derived data that's used for the training of these systems. So if we aren't careful, we'll continue to incorporate the bias into our training sets. So Organization 2.0 coming to Singapore. I've been speaking with and working with Professor Lawrence Lowe at the NUS Business School, and we're doing a joint research project around decentralized AI as a governance framework to help present a picture of what this looks like for a variety of different verticals, from food and energy, finance, healthcare, looking at where organizations are today, Org 1.0, and what could they look like as organizations, as a 2.0 organization. What would the governance structure look like? How could AI unlock new value? What would the ROI opportunity look like if we were thinking in this kind of way and had a transitionary path to get there? Also working with the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center here to build an MVP around this. And the real purpose of this, working with Director of Innovation Andy Sim, is to build a solution that allows for load balancing of talent. So if that data scientist, going back to that data scientist, if he was able to be allocated to a nonprofit, perhaps not at his full rate, but that data scientist, the company that employs him, could get a tax benefit. So there's a way to then provide that to organizations that need that resource. So as a summary, a new AI framework based on human factors and economics of self-interest. So I think it's very important that we take those things into account. And one of the challenges when we think of AI, we automatically go first to technology. And I believe that can be a mistake. I think we need to start with people. Companies are people, organizations are made up of people, customers are people, and that is really a starting point for this. there's also a process that has to happen of people operating in coordination. And there is an economic perspective that we have to have in how we gather their incentives to make them have the right behaviors. Lastly, technology can help us automate and scale that up. So it begins with people, then process. Tech is the easy part. AI and blockchain is also not a magic that solves society's ills, so I don't want to give the impression that this is some sort of panacea. But it also presents new capabilities that didn't exist when we had to rely on an organization 1.0 structure. So now that we have these capabilities of artificial intelligence and blockchain and some of these new tools, and we should be thinking about how we govern ourselves and how we operate in much different ways. What worked in the past doesn't necessarily translate into Organization 2.0. This goes back to Future Shock and Alvin Toffler's quote about unlearning. So that is going to be one of the biggest challenges as we see a change in the demographics from boomers to millennials and Gen Zs and all these other things, is an awareness that there are perhaps other ways to organize ourselves. But regardless of the economics behind this, the idea is for us to provide the most for the most. And that is what we're trying to accomplish. So oftentimes we can mistake the means and the ends, and this is a reminder that there are perhaps better ways to have better economic models, to have more people-centered approaches that doesn't necessarily have to stifle the innate human creativity that's within all of us. And we can unlock that utilization to see greater returns for everyone. So as you build your AI-fueled organization, ask yourself, what does ethical AI mean? And how do you define that? So I think that's an important aspect to ask. How does governance and ethics overlap? Not just for your organization, but for society as a whole. And I think it's more than just thinking from a quarterly profit statement. It's really looking over the long term of where you wanted to take the organization. Do the algorithms align with your values and those of society in general? How do you build transparency into AI decision making so that we have the ability to intervene before these systems become rogue agents that run in the background making decisions? Can you calibrate your models to remove the unconscious bias that may exist in the underlying data or the surrounding environment? This is also a challenge. We were building our data sets, and we were building a data set for gender classification back before there was all these tools. And it would classify a baby's face as an old man, and if you had fringe on your bangs, it would think that you were an alien or something. It's just crazy how machines are interpreting things, and we have to be conscious of our biases that we're passing on to these algorithms. So design considerations for an evolutionary path. First up, it's assisting. So this is where we are today. We're using tools like a robotic process automation. We're using natural language processing. We're extracting data from pieces of paper, and we're putting them into more automated systems. So it's where humans comprehend, and we're generating insights from this. Augmented intelligence is where we have humans and machines working together, and then machines eventually helping to make decisions or provide recommendations. I guess similar to your Netflix recommendations. Autonomous intelligence. So this is where we can eventually get to. And then the goal of this would be to build an autonomous organization, one that runs on code, where it can handle the more tedious aspects of some of the data inputs that come into an organization. But there's a very human element to this as well, because we are going to excel at what we do best. And that often comes from an emotional quotient, not necessarily just from an intellectual one that machines will do far better than we will. So this call for collaboration with NUS, it is an internal assessment of existing governance frameworks of where you are today and where you're going in the future. Looking at the talent and expertise to define the gaps of how we get you there, and augmenting the existing resources of perhaps other startups that can help accelerate the AI journey for many of these organizations. There's a technology roadmap that obviously is incredibly important to this, but that very much ties into the digital governance structure that you're trying to create and trying to manage. So join us on this call for collaboration, Blackbox Foundation with NUS, thinking through some of the challenges that exist and how we can get from where we are today to this new future. So thank you so much for your time.